All right, everyone. Hello. Welcome to a brand new podcast that I am starting. This is the Freedom Fighters podcast live on Griffon Gaming. Also, for those who don't know me by my YouTube channel, Bryce Thon. And without further ado, let's dive right into today's show. We are going to start off here with it's a little older news at this point, but I still feel like it's worth talking about for just the broader topic. So John Gruden, former head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, was more or less forced to resign due to some very let's just call it stupid things that he had said. I don't think any of them were even remotely intended in the manner in which he stated them. However, even back then, just everyone had a general understanding that everything you say in any sort of internet forum, whether it be emails or Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, whatever, it was going to be stuck there forever. Because even if you delete them, somebody could very easily dig up the files and just repost them. So anyways, John Gruden had said some stuff that was critical of a member of the NFL staff. Then later on, a few years later, he had said something to Roger Goodell about pressuring the Rams to draft Michael Sam, pretty much solely because of Michael Sam's sexuality. He had used a word that nowadays would probably trigger some people, but back then, I mean, who cared? Anyways, so unfortunately, this stuff was leaked, and John Gruden is out of a job now. Now, the Libertarian Party's official Twitter page decided to actually release a statement on the matter, and I gotta say, whoever released this statement either doesn't understand the broader issues with cancel culture, or they really want to go out of their way to make the Libertarian Party look awful. And if it's no matter which one it is, you almost have to ask why they are in the position they're in within the Libertarian Party, because you have a lot, like, don't get me wrong, I love libertarianism. I love the idea of it, and the Libertarian Party as a whole is a very, very good party filled with very, very great individuals. But whoever posted this probably should not be in the position they're in. So I'm going to read it off, and you can kind of just interpret it however you want. So they said, freedom of speech means that the government may not restrict your right to say that thing. It does not mean that you are free from the consequences of that speech. Okay, duh. If you say something that rub somebody the wrong way. They might act aggressively towards you, or they might get mad at you. Yeah, that's there's consequences to your action. Duh. Thank you for stating the obvious. But this next part of it is what really gets me. Those who use bigoted or hateful language deserve to be exposed so that society can see their true character. Deserve to be exposed. Huh. So see, this is where the problem is, because they, like I said, they either do not understand what cancel culture is, or they are trying to make libertarians as a whole look like borderline social justice warriors, and a majority of this country does not have a positive view of social justice types. So if you are running the Twitter page of a party that is trying to break through in this country, you have a very, like, it might not seem like an important role to your average everyday citizen, but in a sense, you are the mouthpiece for the party, or you are one of the major mouthpieces for the party. You post this, you are making all of us look like morons, to put it bluntly. Okay, so let's give this individual a lesson on cancel culture 101. So what cancel culture is somebody, for whatever reason, maybe they don't like a person, maybe a person said something that made them very angry, and for whatever reason they get it in their head, I am going to ruin that person's life. So what they do is they take something from a long time ago that individual said, and yes, 10 years ago, it is a rather long time. It might not seem like that long ago, but a lot has happened since 2011. And they will spin it in a way that is taken completely or at least partially out of context to try and make that person seem like far worse of a human being than they actually are. Okay? Common folk do not tiptoe around language like this. And like I said, yeah, John Gruden should have known better than to use the language that he did. But he comes from a different era. They talk differently. I think if you read through everything that was leaked, it is very, very clear John Gruden is not a racist. John Gruden is not homophobic. John Gruden is not a sexist pig. John Gruden just is like most head coaches at every level. They have this mindset where they need to be a hard ass all the time. That's just how they are. And to say that he deserved to lose his job over this, when you're supposed to be the mouthpiece for the party of freedom, the party of little government, maximum freedom, just makes the rest of us look like dipshits. And you cannot be doing that. You just... We are coming out of a situation. Perhaps you've heard of it. It's called COVID-19. Which there's going to be a lot to discuss in this episode revolving around that. Some people think it was serious. Some people didn't think so. It's whatever. Okay. The point is, we came out of a situation where you saw a massive push for government totalitarianism. And what you choose to focus on is not Joe Biden's threat to push a mandate through to fine companies $700,000 per employee that's not vaccinated. Which I say a threat because he hasn't actually done it yet, but it's definitely been discussed. Your topic is not the Democrats letting, because it was definitely the Democrats doing this, letting people burn private businesses to the ground last year over police brutality, which you could definitely have your viewpoints on it. You might think the cops are in the wrong. You might think that the person that was being arrested was in the wrong. There's certainly cases of both throughout all of this. Regardless of which stance you have, nobody should be justifying what happened last year with Black Lives Matter and Antifa trouncing through the country, burning shit to the ground on pretty much a daily. Nobody should be justifying that. But the LP doesn't want to talk about that either. They choose to go after the low-hanging fruit that's borderline irrelevant and attack John Gruden for his quote-unquote bigoted and hateful language. Deserve to be exposed, huh? Man, that is appalling to look at. Like I said in my own post on the matter, everyone is entitled to their opinion, but you are in charge of the party's Twitter account, and you word it the way you did. Wow. Anyways, we are now, speaking of COVID, I mean, this is a little bit unrelated, but it kind of is at the same time. President Joe Biden's approval rating just keeps on taking a nosedive, as if people weren't already fed up with this guy. He is now down to, according to Real Clear Politics, a approval rating of 42.3%. A disapproval rating of 52.1%. And this is from October 1st to October 21st. So it hasn't updated over the last 3 days, but his approval rating is taking a nosedive. And all I gotta say to that is, what did you expect? What did you expect with a guy who didn't really campaign on anything last year. Really, the media did all the campaigning for him. And he had 50 years, basically, of showing that he was bad with domestic policy, bad with foreign policy. Oh, yeah, and he was a senator and vice president for pretty much all of that. Then, you get to his presidency. He's paying people $16 an hour to be unemployed. And he keeps extending that and extending that and extending it. And then, here's the crazy thing. Then, he's also basically robbing these landlords blind by forcing them to let their tenants live there for free. So you're paying people $16 an hour and you're not even forcing them to pay rent. And then, after Congress tells you no, we're not extending this anymore, Joe Biden says, I'm going to do it anyways. And then when the Supreme Court tells him no, he keeps going. Then Congress and the Supreme Court tell him no again. So he's stepping well beyond his authority as president of the U.S. to force landlords to let people live there for free. So the landlord has to take care of the property, maintain the property, and oh yeah, they're not even getting paid to do so. Then you have the botched Afghanistan evacuation. Anybody. Well, here's the thing, right? We shouldn't have really been over there past, dare I say, 2001. But if you really want to take it further back, there's a very, very good chance that, and I don't want to sound like I'm standing on the graves of people who died in that event. It was absolutely tragic. But if we hadn't gone over there and put in all these nasty, nasty dictators in the 70s, 80s, and 90s and tried to nation build, there is a very good chance that 9/11 never happens. So how do you respond to that? You decide to let Osama get away when you have a clear chance at capturing him. Then you twist it to where Saddam Hussein is working with him, which never any evidence of that. You use it to go in, snuff out Saddam, and take control of that country and try to nation build again, which is what got us into this mess in the first place. Then you spend years trying to pretend to track down Osama when you know full well where he's at. Finally, you take him out, but you've been over in the Middle East so long, you've now angered this group known as ISIS. So now ISIS begins capturing Americans and beheading them for everyone to see. Beheading them, mass murdering through landmines, mass murdering through firing squad, whatever. So then we decide, you know what, we're just gonna stay over there longer. Snuff all of them out. Guess what? Now the Taliban's back and the Taliban wants their land. So then what do? Trump, which, feel how you want about Trump. Some of you that are going to be watching this are more conservative leaning. Some of you aren't. Feel how you want about Trump. Trump wanted us out in May. He wanted us out through evacuating via the base that we had over there. And we were going to evacuate the citizens and our allies that had been helping us first. And then slowly evacuate the troops. Oh yeah, and we were going to destroy all the equipment we weren't going to bring back. So Joe Biden says, yeah, no, we're actually not going to do that. We're not leaving till August. Then they completely pull out our troops and force everyone to evacuate through Kabul, which gives ISIS, which is still pretty peeved at us, a chance to bomb Kabul's airport. We left all our equipment behind, fully functioning, fully operational. And it is it just me, or does it look like the Biden administration did that on purpose? That the Biden administration botched the evacuation on purpose just to be like, hey, look at this. This is what happens when we try to leave. This is why we need to go back. So, yeah, we never should have been over there in the first place. Most Americans, even Republican voters, are going to tell you we had no business being over there in the first place. At most, they'll tell you that we're justified in going over there to get Osama, but we should have gotten him and left. But the war on terror as a whole was a complete and utter failure on our part. And it was so damn useless. But if you're going to evacuate, you evacuate properly, and that is not what we did. And the Biden administration should be ashamed of themselves, but they're not. They're not, because they're not going to be held accountable for it. They're not going to be held accountable for all the people that could potentially die now as a result of this. Oh yeah, and then to boot, Biden launches a drone strike that killed, get this, no terrorists at all. Just snuffed out a 9-person family with a bunch of infants. And Tulsi Gabbard, of course, the only Democrat that's really attracted any significant attention at being popular solely because of her anti-war stance, goes on Tucker Carlson and just goes, hey, you know what? This is actually the Muslims' fault, because they're bad people, their religion's radical, they're evil, and we had to do it. We didn't need to be over there. We didn't need to drone strike Afghanistan after we left. This has all been completely useless. But this isn't even like everything I just said. Yeah, a lot of people don't like Biden because of this. But it's COVID. It is how the Biden administration has handled COVID. Because you have completely alienated everyone in this damn country. Prior to being elected, you said you weren't going to get the COVID shot because Trump pushed it and it wasn't tested properly. Immediately after getting elected, you not only get the shot, but you start pushing mass propaganda to get everyone vaccinated. Then even if you want to step back further than that, you made COVID in the entirety of 2020 out to be this boogeyman that Facebook and YouTube are going to get mad at me for this, but that it clearly wasn't, because, oh yeah, only 1 to 5% of people that contract COVID even get hospitalized, much less die. Then you say, oh, if you just get the shot, it'll all be over. You won't have to wear a mask anymore. You can go back to living your life as it was. Of course, then the Delta variant happens, and then you try to push that and say, oh, see, this is why we need a vaccine mandate. Because the unvaxxed are getting the vaccinated sick. Now, let me ask you guys this. When prior to COVID, has there ever been a vaccine where if you take the vaccine, within months, you are susceptible to getting the virus that it was supposed to protect against? When? Most of them, once you get the vaccine, you never have to worry about it again. But some of them, 3-4 years down the road, you might have needed a booster. 1 booster, too. And then that was it. This administration has flubbed COVID so hard, and the vaccine mandate that they're threatening people with, which is going to fine businesses $700,000 if they are not forcing people to get vaccinated, is absolutely insane. Because, and people will try and tell you, oh, but we've had COVID vaccines before. Or not COVID vaccine. We've had vaccine mandates before. Why is this any different? Because the vaccine mandates that happened before didn't prevent you from living day-to-day life. You could still go to a restaurant. You could still get your groceries. You could still go to work. The COVID regime has, let's just say, for the sake of our argument, that COVID really is the boogeyman that everyone has made, that the media made it out to be. Let's say, for the sake of it all, that they're right. The COVID regime has never been about actually saving lives. It has always been about forced compliance. It has always been, how can we force people to do what we want them to do? They use the virus as their mechanism for accomplishing that. And here's the thing: you want proof that that what they've done has scared the absolute shit out of people that live in these major cities. Out where I live, nobody cares. Nobody takes it seriously anymore. I went just yesterday with a friend to the Chicago Bulls Detroit Pistons game. And I already think it's stupid to force a mask mandate for indoor events, especially since it's not even remotely taken seriously. And once you go inside, pretty much everyone's got their mask off. But nevertheless, people they're either so scared of COVID or they're so scared of being perceived as not caring about COVID that in the city of Chicago, these people are wearing masks outside in the masses. Pretty much everyone around me and my friend were wearing masks outside. Very few of them were not. And I'm sure it's just as bad in New York, in LA, in just at all of these major cities, in these very, very blue states. And it really is just, it is sad. So terrified of this virus because of media propaganda that they think they have to wear a mask outside. Of course, I mean, it does help that the United States government decided that their COVID expert was going to be Dr. Anthony Fauci, who, by the way, has been exposed for funding gain-of-function research in the lab that COVID came from. Now, he hasn't necessarily been exposed for funding COVID gain-of-function research, but he has funded gain-of-function research in that specific lab. And he lied to Congress about it. But we decided to pick the guy who is also our expert on the AIDS pandemic. And he tried to say that kids were getting AIDS from sharing the same cereal box as their parents. And that AIDS was going to be airborne. And there were scientists back then who were like, dude, you have no idea what you're talking about. All the evidence points to this being a bloodborne pathogen. The people getting AIDS are getting it if they're born with it, or if they have it as a kid, they have it as a kid because their parent had it before they were born. This is the guy we're trusting with COVID. And he has flip-flopped on everything. Dr. Anthony Fauci is a joke. The fact that Donald Trump didn't fire him and put somebody else in absolutely boggles my mind. I don't understand it. Anyways, let's transition to another popular topic. the police departments are all us. I mean, really, any unionized job is seeing mass resignations and defiance in forcing the COVID vaccine. But the police department is really the police department, medical staff, and another one that we're going to get into in a little bit is just seeing mass defiance for this. And good for them. You know what? Just great. This vaccine should not be mandated. And the easiest way to explain it is this. If the vaccine works the way it should, then there's no reason to force a mandate. Because the people that get vaccinated will never have to worry about getting COVID. And the people who are unvaxxed are very, very clearly taking a risk that only harms them. And if the vaccine doesn't work, which it is clearly showing that if it ever did work, its protection is very, very short term and ineffective at best. But anyways, today we are specifically going to focus on the Chicago PD because they have the most amount of news. So, obviously the Chicago Police Department is seeing a lot of people using up all their vacation, and then they're planning on resigning. So, right away what they did was the Chicago decided they were going to restrict cops from taking time off prior to losing their job, as the city prepares to axe up to half of its 13,000 officers who are yet to declare their COVID-19. No. They are refusing to get the vaccine. And the ones that have gotten the vaccine and aren't declaring their status because they know what you're doing is BS. But so yeah, in a memo obtained by a local Chicago news network, Chicago's governing body released a statement saying that until further notice, the use of elective time sworn by sworn Chicago Police Department members is restricted. Furthermore, the use of elective time will require prior approval from the deputy chief or above within the requesting member's chain of command. So yeah, it started off with that. They're still seeing a lot of people take time off. Then Lori Lightfoot, who is one of the worst mayors in this country, by the way, in case anybody wants to know what Chicago's government is like, their mayor is one of the worst in this country. When last year when the riots broke out in Chicago, and the people that were elected to run the suburbs were begging her to send police to protect their neighborhoods, and she refused. Now it's coming full circle. She thought she was going to ask her suburbs, because she's about to lose 6,500 police officers, 6,500 plus police officers. She thought she'd just be like, oh, well, no problem. I'll just ask my suburb communities to send their police. Every single one of them told her, absolutely not. We are not sending our cops to you. It came full circle. She didn't want to protect them last year. They're not going to protect her now. So Chicago's police department is facing a incredibly short-staffed police department, which is going to see a already high crime rate shoot through the roof. I mean, why not? They already don't really feel threatened by the 13,000 cops there. What makes you think they're going to care about 6,500 cops or 6,200 cops? They're going to care. The police department's going to be spread so thin, they're not going to be able to do much. So to try and combat this further, in a last-ditch effort to try and force the Chicago Police Department to stay, Chicago Police Chief warns cops they could lose retirement benefits if they quit over the COVID vaccine. This is unreal. Lightfoot slams Chicago Police Union for trying to induce an insurrection. Where have we heard that before? Induce an insurrection, huh? That's really funny wording there, Lightfoot. And then, yeah, the police chief said, that officers could lose their retirement benefits if they quit rather than get the jab. This is how they try to force compliance on you. They threaten you with losing your job. Then if that doesn't work, they threaten to pull your retirement benefits. Oh, and by the way, if they fire you for refusing to get the vaccine, it's listed as a voluntary resignation, so you can't claim unemployment. I don't know. Are people ready to stand up to grow a set and tell our government no? Because the federal government is not going to be able to enforce this if enough people tell them no. If enough people say no, there is no way the federal government is going to be able to enforce this. How would they? Like, there is not enough government agents to enforce this. And the state isn't going to be, like, if there any states are trying to enforce this, they aren't going to be able to enforce it either. If enough people stand up now, draw the line in the sand, say enough is enough, this is over, we are not doing this anymore, our government will not be able to enforce this. This isn't Australia. They do not have the authority to sit there and mass lock us in our homes, pulverize us for breaking their laws, and throw us in jail for going out and walking our dog. If we stand up now, if we unite as a society and tell them, no, this is done, we're not doing this, the COVID regime ends now, they will have no choice but to back down. And I'm not just talking about people either. Companies out there, you aren't going to be able to enforce this either. You will not be able to fill the amount of positions you lose if people stand up and say no. You need to do your job and say no as well. If people want to get vaccinated, they absolutely 100% have the right to do it. But that does not mean the government can tell us we have to undergo a medical procedure we don't want. They don't do it with the Amish. They don't do it with the Scientologists. And that's another group that people don't bring up either. Feel however you want about the Scientologists. I personally think Scientology's a joke. But how are you going to enforce the COVID vaccine on a group of people that don't believe in medicine? A group of people that believe you can just heal yourself with your mind. How are you going to enforce the COVID vaccine on them? Speaking of the COVID vaccine, I'm not for trying to push for people to just claim religious exemption, because then that's still admitting defeat, because you're still saying that there's a portion of people who should be forced to get this vaccine. But Christians out there, Catholics, Lutherans, non-denominational, Baptists, the COVID vaccine, all of them, Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, Pfizer, all of them, when developing the vaccine, this isn't in the vaccine, but it was used to develop the vaccine. I want to distinguish that, because YouTube will try to punish me for spreading misinformation if I don't distinguish between the two. Stem cells from aborted fetuses were used to develop the vaccine. Say no. I'm not saying cite religious exemption, but tell them no. Because most of you out there are going to be pro-life. You are not going to tell me that you are going to be okay with taking anything that used aborted fetuses for developing that. It's so funny to me too because our government will encourage and push for taxpayer funded abortions. They will use those aborted fetuses, extract their stem cells, use them to develop treatments, but they won't allow stem cell treatment as just like a form of healing. As like a treatment itself. How does the logic work in that? Oh, and by the way, people out there that are socialists or communists that want to try and say, oh, see, this is why capitalism doesn't work, because now the drug companies, the Pfizers, the Johnson and Johnsons, the Modernas, they're all gonna make mass profit on forced vaccination. To all of you out there, true free market capitalism would not force a vaccine on people. So, and on top of it, it wouldn't restrict which companies are allowed to try and develop treatments for a virus either. So the Pfizers, the Johnson and Johnsons, and the Modernas out there would not be allowed to exclusively profit off of COVID. It wouldn't happen. You would not see treatments like some of the ones that have been flagged, because you're not supposed to try and use that as a form of treatment. Whether they're effective or not is irrelevant. Those treatments would be allowed to be used and dispersed to the public without the media and the government trying to shut it down. While simultaneously forcing basically COVID vaccine or bust. Transitioning to the other aspect of it that I didn't bring up earlier, airlines, specifically American Airlines. They're seeing a sudden staff shortage. And at first they tried to play it off as though they weren't allowed to the day where they had a bunch of flight delays, they're trying to say it was weather based. But now they're finally coming forward, and they're finally more or less forced to admit that they have a staff shortage. Why do they have a staff shortage? Because they're one of the companies out there that's already forcing people to get the COVID shot. And people said no. Pilots, flight attendants, they all walked out. Whether it was organized or if they all just said enough is enough is irrelevant. I think that is one of the most beautiful things they could have done. Just top notch, high quality, middle fingers to all these people out there trying to force compliance on average everyday American citizens. It really truly was one of the most beautiful things that I saw. And then for the media to try and cover it up and say, oh, it was weather that delayed the flights. Like, come on. Who do you think you're fooling here? So, for those who don't already know, because some of you that are going to watch this video are going to see it through only knowing me through my YouTube channel. And some of you that are going to see this video probably don't know that I have a YouTube channel. But I am about as officially as I can be for now running for my state assembly as a member of the Libertarian Party. And for those of you who don't know me on a personal level, I will leave in the description below if you're interested in helping ways that you can contact me. I will also be leaving my Facebook page in the description below as well, so you can kind of get the overarching gist of what I'm trying to do. But the reason I'm doing this is because politics, to put it bluntly, are something that has always intrigued me. And I've always had libertarian principles, even when I was more left-leaning, I guess, politically. Over the years, I've slowly kind of edged more and more conservative, but the libertarian elements of my political identity have always been there. I have always believed that giving the government too much power over your life leads to tyranny, and tyranny leads to places like China or North Korea, where you have no rights as a citizen. Okay, backtrack. You have your inalienable rights. Your rights that even in a pure anarchical society with no government whatsoever you would have. And that's your rights to life, liberty, and property. The problem is, in those governments, they don't think you have those rights. Especially not the property one. They definitely don't think you have the right to property. And America is heading down that road. After seeing the last year, seeing how our government handled COVID, and all the infighting, and the Democrats inconsistently forcing lockdowns, and then trying to claim that conservatives or Republicans were fascists for not enforcing the lockdowns, when the reality of the situation is that most of your Republican Party are a bunch of neocon warhawk do-nothings. And that the Democrats are really the fascists out there. Your neo-libs and your far left whack jobs. And I'm sitting there watching all this infighting, and I am so fed up with all of it. I am fed up with the neoconservatives. I'm fed up with the neoliberals. I'm fed up with just big government in general. We have a welfare state. We are trillions upon trillions of dollars in debt. We are constantly sending our troops over to areas that we have no business being in the first place. You have one political faction trying to violate your rights on a pretty much a daily basis, while the other one just sits there and acts as a roadblock at best. Both political factions, when they've had control, have felt the need to use their beliefs to force their ideology onto the other side. And our country as a whole is suffering for allowing these two political factions to go relatively unchecked for almost 2 centuries now. We're about 30 years away from when the Democrats and Republicans, from being 2 centuries removed from when those two parties became the major political factions in this country. And so yeah, I am standing up for what I believe in. I am being a person of conviction, a person of very, very strong beliefs in individual freedom and limited government. And I am just so fed up with Republicans and Democrats. There are some good ones out there. Rand Paul is he is the greatest Republican in the party today. But the problem is, I almost am reluctant to call him a Republican because he is much more like his dad, Ron Paul, who was a diehard libertarian even when he joined the Republican Party. He was still very, very much running on his libertarian principle. And if you want any proof of how little the Republicans care about actually pushing back on democratic tyranny, I turn you no further than my biggest issues with Rob Summerfield, who is the incumbent in my state assembly. Now, I'm sure those of you out there who are in my state assembly, like myself, get in your emails the Summerfield summaries. And, I'll read through it because I'm curious what he's been up to. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think I've yet to read about him actually pushing back on these COVID mandates. Even when COVID was brought up, I don't think he ever actually took a hard stance against this stuff. He never took a stance against forcing people to mask up. He never took a stance against locking everybody down, unless you were arbitrarily considered to be an employee of an essential business, in which case you were forced to wear a mask and work. Great. Whatever. He's... And you know, I've talked to him. I've had conversations with him because he caught wind of me being unfavorable towards him. And I told him exactly what I was critical of with him. I told him that you genuinely come off as very, very wishy-washy on a lot of stuff. And in your 2020 campaign, you talked about potentially increasing the gas tax. He tried wording it as, oh, we're gonna leave it up to the individual municipalities on if they increase that stuff or not. But that's not what you said in your interview. You said you would consider increasing it. You said you'd consider lifting the hard cap on property tax, which Wisconsin is one of the highest property taxed states in the country. Or at least loosening the reins a little bit to let Tony Evers increase the property tax. You never took a hard stance one way or the other on it, but you said you'd definitely consider it. And that to me is a problem with you running the show. You are far too wishy-washy on things that should matter, and you are willing to rob your constituents blind for the sake of compromise. And I'm tired of it. And that's not just you. That is my major problem with the Republican Party as a whole. You are watching, and to an extent this is your fault too, because two of the more recent examples of them believing they know better than you do how to run your life, in which both parties agreed on, was the war on drugs, both when Reagan was really pushing for it, which Joe Biden was actually pushing for it harder. He was actually more aggressive on the war on drugs than Reagan was. Nobody ever talks about that, by the way. But the war on drugs and the 1994 crime bill that followed up, that was an example of bipartisan legislation in which our government decided they know better than you how to run your life. And the Patriot Act. People don't know this. They think this was just a Republican thing. But the Patriot Act was passed through bipartisan agreement. The Democrats and the Republicans both decided your Fourth Amendment right to privacy was irrelevant. That it didn't matter. So I guess to kind of wrap this up, I'm just gonna leave you with this. You can continue to believe that eventually the two major parties are gonna actually care about the American people again and continue to vote for them. Or you can continue to believe the lie that your party already does care about the American people. Or you can realize that the two-party system is incredibly broken and it is time for third parties to take the reins here. Right now, including myself, counting myself, the Libertarian Party has 6 people on the ballot, with several more coming in for other positions that you actually can't file for until December. The Libertarian Party of Wisconsin wants to turn this ship around. They want to fix this, and they believe that the answer is more freedoms, less government. We need you to stand by us and to fight this authoritarian garbage that has been running our country since the 1850s. The choice is yours. Now is the best chance we have ever had at changing things in here, and the choice is ultimately up to you. Anyways, thank you so much for tuning in. If you would like to be a part of the podcast in future episodes, I will leave in the description below ways to get a hold of me, and we can discuss what we're going to talk about, how to approach it. If you have any unique positions you want to bring up on the show that maybe I'm not going to address, feel free to do it. Otherwise, I thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, peace out.